I don't claim to be a theologian, so the theologians in the room will be very disappointed with the next 20 minutes. I consider myself a practitioner who's very interested in theology. I'm kind of a praxis person. I get very excited when I discover that the things I'm doing actually mean something. We discover our theology along the road a lot of the time. So what I want to present to you is just 5 simple things. We're going to do this in 15 minutes, I think, at the most. 5 themes, 5 statements, if you like, about the nature and the purpose of God that I think are very, very important to how we host prayer spaces. This, as the Father said over there, I would suggest these are ways to use the tool well. These are some things to hold in mind, some theological statements, some core values that we want to see as a foundation to every prayer space. I don't know if that helps. So, save your stones until later. We'll give it our best shot. And these are going to sound really simple, but I think they're really important too. The first is this: God made everyone spiritual. Not just those that are aware and practicing their spiritual life, and those that feel a little bit dull to it. God made everyone spiritual. We don't deposit, we don't give spirituality, we don't teach someone how to be spiritual. They are. And Rebecca and I and David Hay would definitely say that children are far more aware of their spiritual life. They're tuned in. It's like they've tuned the dial in. They're aware of things. They don't even understand it up here, but they feel it in here. I keep using this this sort of imagery. My daughter Poppy, who's deaf, my wife and I, we learned sign language when Poppy was very young. And we've been to lots of conferences and training events around how parents can help their deaf children. And we were at one many years ago where an American guy was teaching us. There were about 100 parents in the room. We were all hearing parents, we could all hear, but we all had deaf children. And as this American guy was speaking, he was talking to us, and then he would slip into sign language. He would start using signs. And then he would stop himself and he would say, "Oh, really sorry, I know you can hear me. Okay, I'll carry on." And then he would carry on, and gradually he would slip into using sign language again. And eventually he said to us, "Look, I'm really sorry, I just love sign language. It helps me to express myself sometimes in ways where words are not enough. Sometimes the sign seems to express more than the words. For example," he said, "the words 'I know' are quite limited. There is at least 2 signs for the phrase 'I know' in British Sign Language. Here's the first one: 'I know.' What does that mean, do you think? Intellectual, I know about, thinking, theory, yeah. And then this is the other one: 'I know.' I feel it, gut feeling. Sometimes we know things even if we don't know them. Isn't that true? I just know it. The God who is everywhere is sometimes somewhere. The God who is everywhere, I know that. But sometimes God is more in here than out there. Or more out there than in here. Yeah? The Bible's full of examples of God's presence accumulating inside a tent or in a room. I don't understand that. How can the God who is everywhere all the time be more in here? But I know it because I've experienced it. And I'm sure you have at times. Church history is full of examples. Where I live in the northeast coast of England, the Celtic Christians, that was kind of their homeland. They would talk about some places being thin places. Places where it was the curtain between the physical world and the spiritual world was thin. You could just feel something. They knew something, and we've probably all experienced those moments when I just know God is with me. I don't understand, Does that make sense? Yeah. And so lots of prayer spaces are like that. And I think children and young people, they know things. They know their spiritual life even if they don't know it up here. God made everyone spiritual. And so what that means is we don't get to take Jesus anywhere because Jesus is always already there. Yeah? Jesus is always already at work in the lives of every child and young person. Doesn't matter what their faith background is. Jesus is already at work. The work of the Spirit is there's already something going on there. Which leads me on to this second point. God has a mission. We don't have a mission. God has a mission that we are invited to join in with. And it's very simple. God's mission is to reconcile all things to himself through his Son. Yeah? This is, oh, that they may be one as we are one. This is the message, Paul's letters. The ministry of reconciliation, of bringing everything back into relationship with God. This is the mission of God. So here's a great question. What would a reconciled school look like? What would it look like? Maybe that's a good place to start rather than let's run a prayer space. Maybe we should dream a little bit. What would our school community look like if it was full of the presence of God? Fully reconciled to God. That's a worthwhile question, isn't it? That's a worthwhile prayer. God, help us to reconcile all things in my life to you. To reconcile this whole school. To make this school a kinder, more generous, more forgiving, more caring. A place where teachers and children really want to come because it feels whole. It feels shalom-like. Feels like the kingdom is here. Yeah? I hope that's what we are pursuing. This mission that we're caught up in to reconcile all things. I don't know if any of you read different versions of the Bible. I've taken recently to reading the Message version. Eugene Peterson is an American theologian, and he's... has anyone read any of the Message version of the Bible? It's kind of an everyday language version of the Bible. It's like it's not a translation, it's an interpretation. That's the word, isn't it? And let me just read to you Eugene Peterson's interpretation of a couple of verses in Matthew 5. Jesus says this. It's the familiar salt and light passage. You know, we've all heard that passage probably many times. But this is the way that Eugene Peterson interprets it. Let me tell you why you're here. Let me tell you what your mission is. You're here to be the salt seasoning that brings out the God flavours of the earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness, etc.? Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colours in the world. I really like this. I like this translation because it sounds a lot like the way Jesus behaved with people. You know, the New International Version and lots of other versions of the Bible put there's kind of an adversarial, there's a conflicting relationship between light and dark. Yeah? We're all light and everything else out there is dark. We're here to bring everything to the darkness because it's all dark out there. Yeah? What Eugene Peterson is suggesting here, and I think he's onto something because I see this in the way Jesus treats people, is you're here to be the light, to bring out the God colours. To say to children and young people, you're amazing. God's colour is in you already. Let's shine some light on it. Yeah? I haven't got everything to deposit in you. You've got it too. The work of God is already in you. You might just not know it yet. But you do know it. There's something in you that desires justice, and there's something in you that knows you it's better to be kind. God colours are in you. And so our task, our mission, is to reconcile, is to bring out those God colours. There's a better way to live, and you're invited. Does that make sense? I really like this translation. I don't know if any of you read any Henry Nouwen. It's one of my favourite authors. And in the book, The Wounded Healer, he says this: I am afraid that in a few decades, the church will be accused of having failed at its most basic task, offering people creative ways to communicate with the source of life. Wow. Will we be accused of having failed at our most basic task? Do we think that our most basic task is something else? Do we think that our most basic task is to teach people stuff? Is to tell them stuff so they believe the right things? Hello? Yes. Or is Henry Nouwen right that really our most basic task is to create spaces, is to welcome people into an environment where they can commune with God, where they can come as they are, with whatever's going on in their life, whatever their background is, whatever faith they call themselves. Just come, you are welcome, sit at the table, try these activities, just talk to God. Commune with the source of life. Let your God colours shine. Who knows what might happen? I think he's onto something. I think he's right here. So the third thing, I'm going to speed up a little bit more. God welcomes everyone. We've talked a little bit about hospitality already. Sometimes in the UK we are asked, are these prayer spaces multi-faith prayer spaces? And I always reply, it depends what you mean. If you mean, are there activities that represent the different ways that people pray from Hinduism and Islam and Sikhism and Christianity, etc., then no. I know of two schools in the UK that tried to do that, and they tried to create representative ways that different religions prayed. Two things happened. One was children were really confused. They found it difficult afterwards when the teacher asked, can you remember what the Buddhists do? They were like, I can't remember which one that was. It's not good education for a start. So the children got confused. And the second thing was, some of the children got quite upset with some of the others. So the Muslim children got quite upset with some of the other students who wanted to try the Muslim prayer mat and would accidentally tread on the corner of the mat, and do things that Muslims weren't happy with. Muslim prayer mat, and would accidentally tread on the corner of the mat, and do things that the Muslims weren't happy with, understandably, because they had certain methods and rules to how a Muslim should pray. And so it didn't work. If you mean by, are these prayer spaces multi-faith, if you mean, is everyone welcome? Yes, of course, everyone is welcome. And as I've already explained this morning, there is a way to welcome. There is a way to use this tool. And the way is a way of invitation, which is just like Jesus. Come follow me. Just come along for the walk, come along for the ride. You'll figure it out. Let's talk about your everyday life. Let's talk about your broken relationships, your worries, your big questions. Here's what my Father in heaven is like. Maybe you want to talk to him about it if you want to. So yes, prayer spaces welcome everyone. It's really important that our prayer spaces are hospitable to those of all faiths and none. And I read a really interesting book a few years ago by Luke Bretherton, and the title is Hospitality is Holiness. And he did this big thesis on it, and his argument was that Christians are probably those who are best placed to welcome all faiths and none. Because we have a Saviour, Jesus, who welcomes everyone, who doesn't require rules and regulations, but says, just come. Come and be broken. Come the way you are. Come and be welcome. I love it when students say things like this. They've discovered something. God loves me. I didn't think God loved me. But now I know it. I've experienced something. Two more things really quickly. It's obvious, I guess, but it's really important that prayer spaces have this atmosphere. God hears. God cares. God cares when we need help. Oh, you can't read that. Why don't my dad want me? It says. And don't forget that the children aren't being told that they have to do the activities. They're choosing to write things like that. When we were in the prayer space yesterday, I was stood behind a group writing their sorries on some little whiteboards and then wiping them off. And I watched one of the girls writing this sorry, I'm sorry for fighting with my brother. And some of the other kids were watching her write it, and she wasn't embarrassed to do it because she just wanted to get it out. There was that need. God hears, God cares. It's okay to not be okay. Sometimes I say to classes, imagine if you're my class, sometimes I might say something like this in the introduction. Imagine this, imagine if I get a phone call right now from one of my friends, and the phone call, my friend says to me, Phil, I'm terribly sorry, but your wife and your daughters have just been killed in a car accident. I'm really sorry, but I had to tell you. So imagine, class, I'm going to pray two prayers now. Which one do you think is the authentic prayer, the real prayer? Dear God, please help me. I don't know what to do. My wife and my daughters have been killed, and I'm so upset. Help me. Amen. That was the first prayer. Here's the second prayer. Ah! That usually wakes up the class. And then I'll ask the class, how many of you think the first one was a proper prayer? Most of the hands will go up, even the Christians. Okay, thank you, class. How many of you think the second one might be a more real prayer? One or two hands will go up. They're nearly always not Christians who put their hands up. So why did you think that second one, or why did you think the first one was? Because you put your hands together, because you said God, because you said Amen at the end, because you closed your eyes, you know, all of that stuff. And then, well, those one or two of you that said the second one might be more of a prayer, why did you say that? Well, because you were really angry, or you were upset, and maybe you just didn't know what words to say. We've just learned something huge about prayer. Yeah? Paul's letter to Romans, there are times when all we have are groans. There are times when that is all we can express. God hears. God cares. Even our angry, desperate groans. It's okay to not be okay. So when I visited a prayer space in Romford, and these Methodist friends of mine took me over to a table and said, we don't know what to do about this prayer. Please could you just give us some advice? This prayer had two words. And forgive me for repeating it, but these were the words. Fuck cancer. And so these Methodist ministers said, should we remove it? I said, if that prayer multiplies, if you end up with lots of them, you know, I remember visiting a prayer space once where someone had put, thank you God for cheese. And by the end of the week there were hundreds of post-it notes all saying thank you God for cheese. You know. Now if it's going to multiply, maybe it's good to remove a few of them. But if you remove that boy, it was a boy that wrote it, that boy's prayer, what if that boy comes back to the prayer space? Where's my prayer's not acceptable? Do you think God's going, la la la, don't like that word, use a different word? Or do you think there was a huge echo from the heaven saying exactly, I hate it too? God hears, God cares, even our angry psalm-like prayers, you know. And the final thing is this. There are times when God speaks and God acts. There are times when God does things. I remember reading this. It was really fun. It made me see God everywhere I look. What an incredible thing for a child to say. This is the desire of my life. I want to see God everywhere I look. God has spoken to me. I don't know what that child felt God spoke to her about as a young girl, but something happened for her. She felt God spoke or God acted. Amazing. I feel now closer to God. This was the girl I mentioned earlier who tore up the sorry. Felt funny when tearing it up. And how about this? I don't know if any of you are on Twitter. Twitter is a strange social media idea where you can only use 160 letters to tell your message. And so we received this message from someone running a prayer space on Twitter. Hi, thanks to you all for all your amazing ideas. Pupil had a bad skin rash, allergies, for 2 weeks. He walked in to the prayer space with a rash, prayed on her, and that was the end of the message. And then we got this message, prayed on her, little post-it note for it to go as it made him feel sad. He left with no rash. Miracle? Coincidence? It's a very happy boy. No one prayed with him. No one prayed for him. This little boy wrote something. I don't even know what he wrote on a post-it note, but it was some kind of, I don't like this rash, it's horrible, I hate it, on a post-it note. And within an hour, as he left, the rash had gone. I've met the woman who wrote this tweet to us, and she said that is exactly what happened. I can't explain it any other way. But there are times when God does things unexpected. And it's not just for children, for young people. Sometimes it's the teachers as well. This is a head of religious education who admitted to me, he said, I don't really believe in God. I've not been going to church for a long time, but the prayer space drew me closer to God. And then this final one as well, which I just love. The teacher wrote the day I said, come in. So, apologies for the shallow theology, but I hope that gives you a sense of what we feel is important about prayer spaces. Has anybody got any comments or questions about this before we just do a little bit of working groups? There are no stones in the room, so you can't throw them at me, which is good. Yes?
I think Louisa Hay, I don't know whether you know who she is. She's a Hay, like the person
David Hay. Okay, yeah.
Before, but I don't know whether it is a...
Okay.
She wrote a book about the things you feel on the outside of the body,
yeah.
and that they're a manifestation of what you're feeling inside. So it makes sense what you said about the rash and so on.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, often people who are feeling bitter, they often feel it in their stomach, don't they?
But there are things like psoriasis and...
May well be, yeah. I think our body and our spirit are far more connected than we might realise, yeah. Great. What we'd like to do, actually, is to do a little bit of work in groups around 3 questions. We've got half an hour to go. Is everybody okay? Anyone need a wriggle, a massage? Anyone for a massage? Ask the person next to you or behind you. Maybe just a little bit of shoulder massage. So what we'd like to do, there are 3 big questions that we'd like to... We are aware that some of you have experience already of prayer spaces or may have some ideas, and it would be good to share that together. The 3 things that we want to look at. One is, how do we grow the spiritual life in our schools? Maybe you've run a prayer space, packed it up. We got the questions on it. Yes. What happens after a prayer space? How can schools continue to foster creative spirituality? What next? So that would be a good question to look at. The second thing is this pastoral question. Is there any wisdom in the room here around what can we do to offer more support? We talked about this a little bit, but maybe there's some wisdom in the room about how we can continue to support individual children as a result of their experience. And then the final thing is this, you know, I've talked a little bit about multi-faith context. How can we make these prayer spaces work really well for children and young people who are coming from different cultural and faith backgrounds? What can we do to use the tool really well with a diverse, an increasingly diverse community? So, is that okay?